Hey guys, welcome to episode number 563. Today is Monday, so it's Update Monday, and today we are taking a break from the fish room renovation projects because we have something very exciting going on. Today, we're going to take a quick tour of the day in the life of Greg Jones, the day in the life of my aquarium box. We've got a crazy thing going on today. We are picking up a pallet, a full pallet of hermit crab shells, reef hermit crab shells, not the land hermit crabs, but the little tiny reef hermit crabs that keep your reefs clean. So we've got a lot to pick up today. We are at the receiving warehouse right now to pick up the full pallet. We got to bring all of these boxes home. We got to bag some of them up, and then we'll talk a little bit more about reef hermit crabs. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you hit the subscribe button. You can also go check out myaquariumbox.com if you want to help support this channel. We've got a lot of work today, so let's get started. So come along with me and learn how to be a better aquarist. Alright guys, we are back home with our hermit crab shells, and if you're ever curious what 400 kilos of seashells looks like, this will give you a pretty good idea of what we're talking about. So my aquarium box has a product, a reef hermit crab shell product, and we've been buying sort of small quantities of shells up until now, and we've decided to up our game, and we've got an import license and the whole 9 yards. And so this is our first big shipment of shells. Now we have 4 varieties of shells here right now. We have used probably up to 6 or 8 different varieties of shells total, and what we try to do is we try to mix at least 3 different types of shells into our reef hermit crab shell mix, from the smaller shells to the medium to the large size shells, to make sure that regardless of what kind of hermit crabs you have in your reef tank, we've got spare shells that will fit those hermit crabs. Now let's take a closer look at these 4 different types of shells that we have, starting over here. I believe this is a Necarius snail shell, and I believe the more common name for these is just like a mud snail. These things are super common, and they're not that exciting to look at because they're just sort of black in color, but they are the right shape and the right size for the majority of your smaller size hermit crabs. So those are pretty cool right there. That's the first one we have. The next one we have, I believe, is also a Necarius. It's a very large family of snails, I believe, and these are more of the dotted variety. This is sort of a mix, and it's kind of hard to see the difference between these, but we will pull these out a little bit later in the video and inspect them up close so that you can get a better view of these. But yeah, again, they're sort of a small size shell. The important part is that they've got a smooth round opening, and as long as it's the right size, hermit crabs will love them. So those are 2 of the smaller varieties. Then we sort of step up into a medium size shell, and I believe this is like a spurred turban or an astrea type shell. And some of them, especially the smaller ones, tend to have these spikes on the sides, but as they get older, it seems like the spikes sort of wear off, and that might be after they've been deceased and collected. You know, when they're rolling around in the surf or whatever, those spikes are the first thing to break off. But as they age, they might just naturally lose them over time as well. So these make a good medium-sized shell. And then probably my favorite are the turbo shells. And these ones are a little bit bigger than I would have liked, but there are some smaller ones mixed in here as well. Some of these really big ones we probably won't use, but these are really nice, really beautiful green jade colored shells, and these will look stunning for any of the very large varieties of reef hermit crabs. Again, like the largest ones that you can see here in these bags, these are probably too big for reef hermit crabs, but they would make good shells for land hermit crabs, some of your smaller land hermit crabs. But those are the 4 varieties of shells that we just got in. It's probably going to take me a week or 2 to get through all of these and to pack them up, but we certainly will get started.
Alright guys, we are back inside, downstairs in the fish room, and I thought it would be interesting to take a closer look at all of these different varieties of seashells. And we can start from the smallest type and work our way up to the largest type. These ones are the dotted Nasa snail, or Nacerius snail. And if we take a close look at these guys, you can see they have a very distinctive black and white pattern on them, and they do stay fairly small. Even the largest ones are pretty close in size to the smallest ones, and these would be really good for your smaller varieties of reef hermit crabs. All of your mini or nano or dwarf varieties would do really well in shells like this. Of course, providing shells that are slightly larger than the hermit crabs are currently residing in is the ideal situation to give them plenty of options when they're molting, and you know, if they get scared or if they get moved out of their current shell by another inhabitant through fighting, you want plenty of spare shells laying around, and these are probably the smallest variety of shell that we have currently. Next one up is actually one that we took a look at outside, and here it is here. This is the mud snail. I believe this is also a Nacerius type of snail. And these ones have a much more elongated shell than the ones we just looked at, but and they are sort of a darker black brown color, so not the most attractive shell, but they are the right shape and size again for a lot of those dwarf varieties of crabs. Now, we don't want anything much longer than these because it's just going to provide extra friction when the hermit crabs are trying to crawl around in these shells. You don't want them to have to expend all of their energy carrying their shell through the water, but these are certainly widely used by the smaller varieties of hermit crabs in the wild. So another very cool shell there. Alright, next up is one. This is a sand snail shell, and these ones are sort of knobby in appearance, but they have a nice smooth round opening, and that is what you're looking for in a hermit crab shell. Hermit crabs, when they're looking for shells, they want something that is going to fit, that isn't going to irritate them. Some shells do have like a ribbed interior to the shell, and hermit crabs don't necessarily like those as much. So these sand shells, sand snail shells, are another good option. These ones are really tough. They're really thick. They're not quite as long, but they are very, very robust shell. So these things will withstand a lot, and hermit crabs do tend to go towards the shells that are going to last and aren't going to fall apart or crack, because they don't want something that they're gonna have to swap out of anytime soon. All right, next one up, these are rock snail shells, and these ones are similar to the sand snails. The only difference is they're a little bit bigger and they're not quite as long. They're sort of they're more oblong than they are long, and they do have some more pronounced spikes to them. You can see those there. Pretty cool. This is sort of like the middle of the road, like medium size snail shell, and these would probably be sort of a transitionary shell. The largest of your dwarf hermits may use these, and the smallest of your larger varieties of reef hermits would also use these. So that's a very cool shell there as well. Again, these ones are basically built like a tank. Like, these shells are so strong. You could probably crack this with a hammer and it wouldn't break. So that's a cool one. And then again, we get to these spiked snail shells. Oop, that one goes there. And like we talked about earlier, the smaller ones sort of have the more pronounced spikes. I believe these are Estrella snails. They go by a few different names though, and as they get bigger they sort of lose those spikes, but they are the right shape and size, and hermit crabs do enjoy using these as well. Now, one thing you have to watch out for is a shell that is too pyramid shaped. Now, something like this may be less likely to be used just because it's so heavy, and because the opening and the way that opening approaches the rest of this shell, it may just be too heavy and too awkward for a hermit crab to pick up and walk around in. So anything that's a little bit more compact with your nice smooth round opening, those are the ones that are more readily accepted by your hermit crabs. So there we go. You see those ones there. And then the last one that we like to use quite a bit are these turbo shells. Now, there's a lot of different varieties of turbo shells. You more often see the large specimens of the shells. You know, this is sort of like on the small end of large, but you know, these are like collector type shells. So you don't often see the smaller turbo shells like these, and these are the ones that we are really after for our reef hermit crabs. And any of your varieties of large reef hermit crabs will absolutely love these types of shells. Actually, like I said earlier, your land hermit crabs will actually use these type of shells as well. Turbos are very well accepted by hermit crabs. And so these ones particularly are very, very beautiful just because of the green, the pronounced green coloration of these shells. They sort of have a silver interior, and then they have a green exterior, and these look absolutely stunning when there's just a bunch of hermit crabs walking around in your reef tank against the white sand, against the white rocks. You can definitely see these guys moving around, and it's a very cool thing to see. So like I said, these are usually found in the larger sizes. It's a little bit harder to find the smaller sizes for your reef hermit crabs, but we do have a pretty good mix of sizes here. So those are our green turbo shells. Pretty cool. There's a few other runner-ups, shells that we don't necessarily carry yet, but we may in the future. We may use in this shell mix for our reef hermit crab shells. This is another turbo. The only difference here is it's less green on the outside. It's more of like a yellow color, and then it's got like a gold mouth on the inside. And these ones are significantly more expensive. So, and they do come in mostly larger sizes. So it is a little bit more difficult to find these guys for, you know, a shell mix for reef hermit crab shells. It's very easy to find, very large specimens of these to put in like your shell collection on your shelf or whatever. So there's that gold mouth turbo there. And then I believe this one is called a Babylonia shell or snail. And these ones are extremely common as well. In fact, you may see these for sale online as single specimens all over the place. They are fairly inexpensive. The only reason we don't use them for reef hermit crab shells is the shell itself is pretty thin. And the risk and the fear is that if these are just in a bag of shells bumping all around, getting tossed around, by the time they get to the customer, they'll probably be broken, and we don't want that. So we have stayed away from these, although they are very attractive to look at. They probably wouldn't do all that well in a mix of shells. So there's that one. And then the last one to look at here, again, this is one that would be readily accepted by hermit crabs of all shapes and sizes. This is a moon snail shell. The problem again with this one is that they are just so thin and so fragile that they would just get beat up and destroyed. I mean, compare this shell to this shell and you can see the difference. This one's gonna survive the apocalypse and this one's gonna break just by looking at it. So that's a closer look at all of the different shells that we have going on. Again, this is the final product that we are currently manufacturing. It's called my Aquarium Box Reef Hermit Crab Shells. And this is something that we have been, so far we've been hand packing. However, we may need to start to look at more automated solutions for that, just because of the sheer number of shells you know, we're purchasing. But we got a nice package designed and printed, and you know, we had to get our own official barcode registered for our company. We got our, you know, our address on it, all the information. It's got the little punch hole so it can go in a store and go on a shelf. They can also sit upright. So pretty cool little package design here. This is something I'm really proud of. This is something that I put together and sort of followed through on this all the way to the finished product here. And I'm happy to say that in 2019 we are going to start to wholesale these to other companies. So if you know of an aquarium store that may be interested in purchasing these wholesale, definitely let me know and we will follow up with them. This is a 12-ounce package, and it's basically got a mix of shells, at least 3 different types of shells, anywhere from a 1/2 inch to 2 inches in shell size. So it should be good for any of your reef hermit crab shells or reef hermit crabs, and it should be enough shells to last you for quite a while. Alright guys, now I have a little story to tell as it relates to hermit crabs and snail shells. Now, I grew up on the coast of Maine, and I spent my childhood in tide pools at low tide, out in the water, looking for animals, flipping over rocks, tearing up seaweed, grabbing crabs and lobsters and hermit crabs. And one of my favorite spots to tide pool on the coast of Maine is in Boothbay Harbor. And the place in particular has a nice sandy beach, and as the tide goes out, it becomes sort of a rocky, muddy shore with a lot of seaweed and a lot of hermit crabs. These are not your reef hermit crabs. They are more of, you know, the coast of Maine hermit crabs, cold water hermit crabs. Nothing I would ever consider collecting from the wild or using in a home aquarium. This is just something that I found growing up and loved to watch as a kid. Collecting them in little buckets, watching them scurry around, and then releasing them before the tide came back in. And the shells that they would always use are these ones here. These are periwinkle shells. If you've been to the coast anywhere in New England, you're probably familiar with periwinkles. They are absolutely everywhere, and they are the right shape and the right size for your smaller varieties of hermit crabs. And because they're everywhere, they're so incredibly abundant. Every single hermit crab I ever found basically was housed up in one of these periwinkle shells. Now, super easy to catch these things in the wild because they had white legs, and it's usually like a black, dark periwinkle shell, and so you would see sort of like white legs poking out of a black shell scurrying around, and it became really easy to pick those up and just grab them out of the water. And I'm talking about like ankle deep water sometimes these things can be found in. So they're really fun, really entertaining to collect, and you could find them in a wide variety of sizes, from very tiny ones all the way up to like the largest size of like periwinkle or whelk shell. And that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun collecting those. Sometimes I would even collect them and drop them off at the local aquarium so that people could experience those during their vacation to the coast of Maine without having to go out and find them themselves on their beach day or whatever. But periwinkles specifically seem like they're a little bit more challenging to find. It's something I have been working on for the past 6 months, relatively unsuccessfully. I mean, I would love to carry periwinkle shells as an alternative to some of the smaller shells that we looked at, just because it is something that is native to the United States, something that is easier to collect locally, something that could employ local people, but it doesn't seem like there's much demand for it. I know overseas there's two main reasons why shells are collected in such large numbers. The first is because some of the larger varieties, people actually eat the snails, and then the leftover product, the byproduct, is the shell. So instead of throwing out the shell, you know, the locals collect the shells, clean the shells, and sell the shells. The other reason being some of the larger varieties of really ornate and beautiful shells can actually fetch quite a bit of money, and so locals will collect those as well and package those up and sell them to tourists, or import them to the United States, and you'll find them in seashell shops in Florida or California or whatever. But periwinkles, it's a pretty drab looking shell. There's really no reason to want this on your shelf or in your bathroom or in any sort of collection whatsoever. They are all over the place on the coast, and there's not much you can do with them. However, people do eat them on occasion, not very often. People do eat them. People go out collecting them. They call it winkling, and you basically just collect them all off the rocks at low tide. You put them in a pot of boiling water, I think, and you just boil them, and then you can sort of pick the meat out of them and just avoid the foot or the opening to the snail. And yeah, I mean, people do eat them. I think it's more popular in like the UK or like Ireland, and it's not something that's done a whole lot anymore. It used to be practiced a lot more in the past, especially when food was a little sparse. But it is something that you can do if you're starving. You can collect them, and you can boil them and eat them. And I have considered on my next trip to Maine to actually do that, to collect them, to boil them up, you shoot a video, and see how difficult it is to actually hand collect them and eat them, and then have the shell as a byproduct. I just know that it's not going to be worth my time, and I don't think it's going to be worth anyone else's time either, which is sort of a bummer. But it is a resource that is available close to home. So anyways, that's the periwinkle story. That's the hermit crab story on the coast of Maine. If you stay tuned to my channel, I'm sure sometime in the future I will do these things, show you guys these hermit crabs out in the wild, and maybe go winkling. Alright guys, and that's gonna do it for this week's video. Hope you guys had fun joining me on a day in the life. Kind of crazy. Every day is different. This one was pretty special because I've been waiting for this shipment of shells for a very long time. Now, we were able to create 36 bags of hermit crab shells here. I've probably got another 1,000 to make, so it's going to be a very long week, and I'm definitely going to need to find a faster, more efficient way of doing this moving into 2019. Now, 2018 was a big year for my aquarium box. I think we accomplished quite a bit. We have a lot more to do next year, a lot of really exciting things coming on the horizon. I will be sure to share those with you guys when we're ready to talk about them. For now, we have a bunch of hermit crab shells. Hope you can see through this example how challenging it is to be a small business. Now, I didn't know that I was gonna buy a whole pallet of seashells, but here I am, it happened, and I'm pretty excited and pretty proud of the product that we've created as a result. It takes a lot of hard work, takes a lot of energy, but in the end, it is all worthwhile. This is a very popular product with saltwater aquarium keepers. There's nothing more distressing than seeing your hermit crabs that you just bought as part of a cleanup crew fighting each other, tearing each other apart, stealing each other's shells. You know, naked hermit crabs that lose their shells walking around, they don't stand a chance because any fish that you have in that tank are going to pick them off immediately. And you know, the other thing that happens is when the hermit crabs attack your snails that you've also purchased, it becomes a problem as well. So this solves all of those things all at the same time. Anyways, guys, if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, you can always go check out myaquariumbox.com. Now, these reef hermit crab shells are currently for sale on shop.myaquariumbox.com. So you can go check them out there. Within the next few weeks of this video being posted, these will also be available for sale on Amazon Prime. So definitely go look for them in the very near future. Anyways, guys, we are getting close to the end of the year, and in next week's video, we still have a lot of stuff to tackle down here in the fish room. We've got this vacuum filter we need to talk about. We've got to clean all of our aquariums. We've got to clean all of the lids to the tanks. We've got a lot of stuff to do to get back up to speed down here in the fish room. We will definitely tackle that in next week's video. So hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.